When competitive Call of Duty decided to transition to franchising in 2020, 12 teams were set to join what is now called the Call of Duty League.
It has been confirmed, rumoured for a while, 100 Thieves, Nadeshot's 100 Thieves will not be competing in the CDL for 2020.
With the loss of 100 Thieves competing in Call of Duty, most Thieves fans had to either follow ex-Thieves players or find a new team to support. At the time, it was completely unknown to the fans if and when 100 Thieves would be back competing. Luckily, it was only one season before 100 Thieves would be repping black and red in the CDL. After the 2019-2020 Modern Warfare season, there were a lot of teams in the CDL either changing location or ownership. With all of the changes, there started to become rumors of who would be joining the CDL in the off-season. Quickly, 100 Thieves became a frontrunner for the newly opened LA slot. Previously held by OGLA or Optic Gaming LA, the brand name Optic was being rebought by previous owner and founder Hex. This led to Optic moving to Chicago and taking over the Huntsman spot, previously partially owned by Hex. All of that left the roster of OGLA to whoever was set to purchase the LA spot. In November of 2020, 100 Thieves announced that they were buying into the CDL under the new name LA Thieves. With 100 Thieves transitioning to LA Thieves, they retained the roster of OGLA. This included TJ Haley, Draza, and three old friends in players Kenny and Slasher, as well as general manager Muddog. Muddog was the GM of the Black Ops 4 100T team, so having him back on the team, fans fully expected a solid team construction. TJ Haley was one of the best S&D players in Call of Duty and was most notable for his search and destroy upbringing. Draza was a new young talent from Alaska that was quickly moved to a substitute role to start off the Cold War season, being that Call of Duty was going back to 4v4 after having been 5v5 for the last 2 years. Kenny and Slasher need no introduction to 100 Thieves fans. Back-to-back tournament champions back in Black Ops 4 under the 100T name, both being top talents in their respective roles with very impressive accolades that followed them. Their next move was to acquire a coach and their fourth player to fill out the roster with TJ, Kenny, and Slasher. Recently retired, JCap was the pickup for the head coach role. JCap was one of the best Call of Duty players of all time and was one of few to win multiple champs events with 2 rings. He was ultra competitive and was known for how intelligent he was in-game. A great pickup when it came to the coaching role. The final player to get picked up was Temp. Previously on New York Subliners, Temp was a very impressive talent that had played with TJ and Slasher a few times before in Call of Duty and with Kenny in Halo. Similar to the BO4 season, this team was expected to compete at a high level with all the talent and chemistry the team had. Despite the tough year their core had while on OGLA, fans were hoping under the new name and with a player's coach in JCap that the Thieves would be back on top of the league early on. After the roster was announced, the team moved into a team house in Texas in order to compete together from there. With COVID still being spread, the teams were forced to compete online for the foreseeable future, leading to most teams and players playing out of Texas. To start off the season, the CDL threw what was called a Kickoff Classic. The Thieves had one match during this, and it was of course against none other than Optic Chicago. Naturally, this was a big match for fans of LA Thieves, despite it being a preseason series. The Thieves started off back and forth in the opening hills of the hardpoint, but started losing control towards the second half of the map, falling in map 1. They then battled in the search and destroy before losing 2 rounds in a row to drop their second map of the series. Things didn't improve in the control, where they lost 3-0, losing the series 3-0 as well. Despite the loss, the upside was that it was preseason and there was still some time before they would start playing matches that had champs implications, giving them the opportunity to work out some of the kinks they had in their gameplay. Going into the start of the season, the Thieves were set to face off against the Minnesota Rocker, New York Subliners, Seattle Surge, London Royal Ravens, and the reigning champs, Dallas Empire. They started off the season hot, taking down Rocker in 3-1 fashion. They didn't ride the high for long before losing to NYSL in a quick 3-0. After that first week, there was a snowstorm in Texas that caused a lot of players and teams to lose power, forcing matches to be pushed back into what became the CDL Super Week. To start off their Super Week, the Thieves took on a familiar face. Octane and the Seattle Surge were up next on the schedule. LAT was expected to take down Surge going into the series, and they started off on that trend, winning the hardpoint in a close one. The series continued to be close, with both teams winning maps back and forth until Game 5. That was where the Thieves pulled away, with TJ showing how good at S&D he really is, going 12-0, leading the Thieves to a Game 5 6-0 sweep. Next up was London Royal Ravens. The Thieves took down the Ravens pretty handedly, winning 3-1 before having to face off against their toughest opponent of the week in Dallas Empire. The Thieves kept it close in the first two maps, losing the hardpoint 250-212 and losing the S&D 6-5 to a Crim 6 Ninja Defuse in a 1v1. The morale seemed to be shot at that point, losing the control 3-1. Despite losing their series against Empire, the Thieves still made winner's bracket going into the first major of the year. They were set to face off against the Los Angeles Guerrillas in winners round 1, a team they were yet to face all year. They came out flat and ended up losing the series 3-0, dropping into losers bracket early. Their next opponent was Toronto Ultra in losers round 3. The frustration from their previous series seemed to spark some fire into the Thieves. They ended up beating Ultra convincingly in 3-0 fashion. This led them back to Optic Chicago. Back in Black Ops 4, 100 Thieves often had the upper hand in the series they played one another. Unfortunately though, they were no longer 100 Thieves. Under the new branding, LA Thieves fell to Optic in a 3-1 fashion, finishing Major 1 as a top 6 team. A pretty disappointing start for themselves as well as for the fans. After the tournament, the Thieves had to address their poor performance. They decided to make a role swap, moving Kenny from the AR to an SMG headed into Stage 2. Stage 2 of the year was considered to be the Toronto home series. The Thieves started off the home series facing off against Ultra and NYSL, going 1-1. The team still felt like there were too many little issues causing them to make mistakes. This led to their first team change of the season. Temp was moved to the bench for a Challengers player by the name of Venom.
My name is Carlos Hernandez. I am from Los Angeles, California, and I am the sub player for LA Thieves.
Venom was someone who was often making big plays when CDL teams would scrim against his team. This led JCap and the Thieves to take a chance on him while sticking with their main 3. With the pickup of Venom though, TJ or Kenny was going to have to move to the flex role, as Venom was an SMG player. The change didn't seem to help much though. The Thieves went on to play the Ravens, FaZe, and LAG next, losing all 3 series. This put them at a 1-4 record going into the Stage 2 major, starting from losers bracket. Because of the poor performance still, the Thieves went back to the drawing board to see what needed to be fixed. They came to the conclusion that the team was playing too slow and decided to make another roster move. This time around, the Thieves decided to bench Slasher and bring in their substitute player, Draza.
By the end of Stage 2 regular season going into the major, we kind of hit a point where we knew something had to change, and that's when we brought Draza in.
My name is Zachary Jordan. I'm from Fairbanks, Alaska, and I'm running the flex for LA Thieves.
This came as a shock to most, knowing that Slasher was a proven talent and Draza had only played a handful of events at the pro level. Many fans were skeptical, but JCap and the Thieves were ready to take on the Major 2 tournament with their new flex player. Going into Major 2, the Thieves only had a few days of practice with the new looking roster, but they felt like the vibes were already higher with Draza in his new role.
Instantly in practice, you could just kind of tell everything was kind of flowing better, you know.
Paris Legion were their first opponents in losers round 1. Thieves came out firing and defeated Legion 3-0. A good start to their new roster, with Draza having a strong performance in his first series on the Thieves. Ravens were up next in losers round 2. This series was much closer, with the 2 teams going the distance. Map 5 was back and forth until the Thieves were able to ice up and win back-to-back rounds to close out the series in a 3-2 fashion. NYSL was their next competition. The momentum seemed to bounce back into the Thieves' favor, with them taking that series 3-0 before having to face off against Toronto in losers round 4. This was where they seemed to run out of steam on their losers bracket run, dropping the series 3-0. Despite the loss, the Thieves still felt confident, seeing that Toronto went on to win Major 2.
They felt like we were frying them. Okay, boys, we go Stage 3 and fry everybody. Yes, sir.
They felt like they had a good opportunity to come out next stage and make some noise in the CDL, especially after it was announced that LAN would be coming back soon.
Bring on the stage.
The Thieves were more confident going into Stage 3, seeing how they had played at Major 2 with such little time as a new team. The first series of Stage 3 was against Seattle once again. Similar to the first time the two matched up against one another, the series went the distance, with the Thieves closing out a 3-2 victory. They played the Ravens, beating them once again before they took on the best team in the game, Atlanta FaZe. FaZe had been on a tear basically all year. If the Thieves could beat them, they would have a lot more confidence knowing they have the potential to beat anyone. Unfortunately, the cards didn't fall in their favor. They ended up losing to FaZe 3-2. The upside was that it was a hard-fought battle that they took the distance. Next up was Optic. This time the Thieves started off hot, winning a close map 1. This was big, knowing the Thieves had struggled to beat Optic in hardpoints in previous series. Optic was able to take map 2 though, tying the series 1-1. Thieves bounced back in the control, winning a close one, giving them the extra momentum to close out the series on the map 4 hardpoint. The Thieves were feeling much better with this new roster and were confident as Major 3 was inching closer. A little before Major 3, Dallas Empire made a roster change, dropping Hook. Hook was one of the players on the Empire during their champs win the year prior and was a talent most teams would want to pick up. With that, the Thieves decided to make their move, picking up Hook in place of TJ, making the new roster Kenny, Draza, Venom, and Hook, going into the Major 3 tournament. With their performance during Stage 3, Thieves were set to start in winners bracket. With the addition of Hook and starting in winners, the team had high hopes for this tournament. Their first opponent in winners round 1 was Florida Mutineers. Florida seemed to come out hot, taking down the Thieves 3-1, dropping the Thieves to losers bracket early in the tournament. This of course was not how the Thieves were anticipating starting the weekend. Once again, the Thieves ran into the Ravens in losers round 3. Similar to the other times these two teams met, the Thieves closed out the series, this time in 3-0 fashion. Once again, the Thieves were set to take on Toronto Ultra in losers round 4. This is where things really started to go wrong. The first map was a slaughter by Ultra. They only allowed the Thieves 14 points in the hardpoint. This was the most dominant hardpoint performance by any team all year. Ultra went on to take the series 3-1 after that. With Major 3 being the last online tournament before going back to LAN, Kenny had brought up he had technical issues all series but was forced to try and play it out.
I spawned into the beginning of the map and I'm literally skipping. The game plan is chalked at that point. Alright, then what it needs to change because I'm not playing. That makes no sense. We have no chance.
With another top 6 placing, the Thieves were ready to be back on LAN. After an extended break between Major 3 and the start of Stage 4, the Thieves came to the decision that their practices weren't going how they would have liked with Hook in the starting spot. With this, the team decided to bring TJ back up to start. TJ had stayed in form while on the bench and it showed when he came back. The vibes were higher once again with him back on the starting roster. Once again, the Thieves faced off against Seattle Surge to start the new stage. The Thieves' respawns didn't look great, but they were still able to close out the series 3-2. The next two series were where things seemed to inevitably come crashing down once again. They faced off against Legion, losing 3-1, and then took on FaZe, losing once again, this time in 3-0 fashion. With this, the team decided to bring Hook and Slasher back into the starting lineup to pair with Kenny and TJ. Things didn't seem to improve right away with the Thieves taking on Rocker and falling 3-2. The upside was they hadn't had much time together going into the series and were looking to turn things around in the next series. Their practices seemed to be better, but they just hadn't clicked in actual matches. With only one series left before the Major 4 tournament, the Thieves had to beat Optic 3-0 in order to still make winners bracket. A tough task for a new roster that didn't have much time together. The Thieves ended up losing the series, which meant they would be starting off in losers bracket once again. Thieves were set to start off against LAG in losers round 1, a team they seemed to struggle against every series they faced off against one another. The upside was that the tournament was back on LAN, something the Thieves and many other teams had been eagerly anticipating. Unfortunately for the Thieves, things only seemed to get worse. Before the tournament, every player was supposed to take and pass a COVID test or they wouldn't be able to compete at the tournament. Not long before the series against LAG, Hook wasn't allowed in the venue because he hadn't passed his COVID test. To make it worse, it wasn't because of a positive test, it was because he had misspelled his own name on the test he submitted. It seemed he had a typo on his test and hadn't caught it, causing him to fail.
Why are you twisting this into some fanfiction conspiracy when it is just black and white? Kyler spelled his name wrong on his test from last night, so it was invalid, then showed up to the venue without his ID and wasn't able to be tested again.
This prevented Hook from being able to play in the series against LAG, forcing another roster change less than a few hours before the two teams were set to face off. Draza was the one being called up to replace Hook for the event. Things didn't end there though. When the Thieves were getting ready to scrim, Draza was having controller issues, forcing him to find a new controller from someone else so he could still play.
What? I can't shoot.
What?
I need a controller, bro.
Oh my
You shoot triggers?
This is a movie. You can't shoot?
Despite all the madness pre-series, the Thieves came out winning map 1. They continued to go back and forth for the rest of the series before losing 3-2. This was the worst placing the Thieves had out of all of their previous ones, getting last. Things desperately needed to be reworked if they wanted to try and bounce back in the coming stage. With another poor performance, the Thieves went on to make another roster change once again. This time, they decided to pick up veteran SMG player John. John had played with Slasher on their Champs roster back in Black Ops 3. So there was a lot of hope that with two veterans such as Slasher and John playing and veteran JCap coaching, that the Thieves could bring some more wins and possibly their first ever championship under the LA Thieves banner. Hook was the one being replaced by John. They also decided to keep Draza in the starting roster over TJ, meaning their new roster was John, Draza, Slasher, and Kenny. To start off Stage 5, the Thieves took on NYSL. They started off hot, winning the first two maps before letting NYSL back into the series, tying it up 2-2. Thieves iced up though, and closed it out winning the series 3-2, preventing the reverse sweep. The Ravens were up next once again. The Thieves took them down 3-1 before falling to FaZe in a 3-1 loss. Legion was next up on the schedule. Thieves came out flat, dropping another series 3-1. Their last match was going to be important though. Not only would it determine if the Thieves started in winner's bracket at Major 5, but it would also lock in a Champs berth. Their opponent though was Optic yet again. Things didn't look good for the Thieves early, with them losing the first two maps. The boys locked in though and pulled out a huge reverse sweep to lock in their spot at Champs, as well as their spot in winner's bracket for Major 5.
It's enough to get the kill though. Scum. Back and forth we go. 15 seconds! Kenny holds the line!
Nice! Let's go! What the f*** is the line? It's a simple line!
To start off Major 5, the Thieves had a tough opponent in winners round 1. Toronto Ultra was set to take on the Thieves. Despite their previous series against one another, the Thieves kept this one pretty close. The outcome didn't change though, with Toronto winning the series 3-2. Another loser's bracket run was going to be required if they wanted to have a higher placement at Major 5. Their next challenger was NYSL in losers round 3. They started off hot, winning map 1 in a tight race to 250. Map 2 was close as well, with the Thieves scraping out a win in round 11, bringing them 2-0 in the series.
One shot. Nice! Come on.
New York bounced back in the control, taking map 3 heading into map 4. Thieves stayed composed and closed out the series in 4 with a 3-1 victory. Dallas Empire were up next in losers round 4. Whoever lost this series would bow out with a top 6 placement. The Thieves weren't looking to place top 6 once again, winning the first map.
Come on, man. Let's go. Guys.
Dallas was no pushover though. They came back and rattled off 3 map wins in a row, closing out the series 3-1. This was another disappointing top 6 finish for LA Thieves. Their only opportunity to finish with a higher placing was going to be at Champs, but it wasn't going to be easy. With all the Thieves' struggles throughout the season, they were starting in losers bracket at Champs. The team knew they were going to have to make a miracle run if they wanted to finish the year with a respectable placement. Unfortunately, during their time practicing before Champs, Kenny got hit with COVID, forcing the team to cancel some of their practice scrims.
Came back negative. I was like, okay, and the lady was like, well, we never get false positives. I'm like, okay, so if y'all retested my test and they came back negative, how do you never get a false positive? Because I'm like, isn't that a false positive?
Hook filled in for Kenny up until Kenny was cleared to come back and compete. Minnesota Rocker was their opponent in losers round 1. The team started off pretty slow, but were able to clutch up and close out the map 1 hardpoint.
Let's go! Give me some love, give me some, baby!
Rocker didn't go away though, winning the S&D in control back-to-back, putting them up 2-1.
Like this, but they're going to have to dig deep if they want to send us toward that map 5.
With their backs against the wall, the Thieves were able to come out and take the map 4 hardpoint, forcing a game 5.
To be that way, and you bet that it will be.
On the brink of elimination, answer back.
If the Thieves wanted to move on, they were going to have to lock in and close out the map 5. Unfortunately, that wasn't in the cards.
The car has to go for the defuse. Major, can he take him down? And he will! Minnesota, stay alive!
The Thieves ended up losing map 5 in 6-3 fashion, knocking them out of champs after one series. The Thieves finished the year with a disappointing showing at champs after having consistent top 6 finishes and an inconsistent roster. Based on the expectations going into the year, the team really underperformed. With the name Thieves, changes were needed to be made going into the next season. Top 6 was not good enough for the organization, and they knew they could be much more competitive in the CDL than what they showed. In the offseason, just like any other year, a lot of players were on the move. There were plenty of options for the Thieves to make some upgrades, but there was one player that seemed to be high on the Thieves' radar. With Kenny staying on the team, it seemed to be the only option to bring the old Hunter Thieves duo back together.